Hi guys, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So today we have several things to do. First of all, grades are up. So I'm gonna do some office hours after you have checked everything. That means Thursday, right? Or also write me. You need to talk more. So I'm gonna do this 15 minutes kind of thing for Thursday. Okay. Uh, what else? So today we have to do our continuation of the general equilibrium chapter, and we're going to do also some partial equilibrium exercises. So today, like if you're here today, we're going to do the solutions basically of problem set 6. And now on Thursday, Chung is going to go over basically these edgeword boxes, and then we're going to send you more problem sets so you get a lot of practice. So let me share to you my screen, and then we can go from that. Okay. So can you see my the leak screen? Okay. So today we have to continue, and one thing we saw the previous class was this definition of basically what is a economy with transfers. But I want to go a little bit quickly over this private ownership economies and the Pareto allocation, which is the main point today. So we want to study the basic welfare property of exchange economy. And so we are going to here have basically I consumers, J firms, L commodities, and then each of them is very heterogeneous with their own preferences, their own choice sets. Firms have their own production sets, so they can produce different stuff, characterized completely by capital Y sub J. So this is a fully heterogeneous economy, right? So it's very different from the macro classical representative agent. Here, everyone has very different technologies, very different preferences, okay? And then you have initially some endowments, which I already explained in previous classes, is initial physical quantities of goods, okay? Which will be weekly greater than zero, and there will be some physical quantities to start with. So you cannot start from zero completely. Some goods have to exist, right? Other goods will be produced in the economy, but some will exist. So what is a pure exchange economy is if the production set is just the garbage can. So this is the minus RL plus, which intuitively means that if you're in this laboratory setup and you have apple and oranges, I give 10 apple, 10 oranges to the total economy, 5 to the first agent of each, and 5 to the second agent of each. Then, if the agents don't like the apple and oranges, they can go and throw it in the trash can by no fee, right? So no cost at all. Okay, so what does it mean is that no new products can be created in this pure exchange economy. However, you can get rid of the existing physical goods. Okay, understood? So this is very important, and surprisingly, this shows up. It's all represented on core exams. So you will get, what happens if you have a measurable box when this free disposal assumption does not hold anymore, right? That's kind of one classical question. So I'll ask Chung also to check it. So try to think about it. Right now, of course, we're in the standard setup, and then we have this setup with the garbage can, right? So it's free to throw the garbage can there. So an allocation is this matrix X comma Y, which is this huge matrix specifying the consumption of each individual in the first part, in the first capital I rows, and then each of them are columns, right? Each column has dimension L, which basically is the number of goods. And then from I plus 1 to capital J plus I, you have the columns of production, okay? So notice here that in this specification, we have all possible goods in the economy, right? Things that are produced, things that are not produced. So this potentially can be huge, right? So usually we have deal right now with models that are very small. So we have, for instance, some endowment and then some internal good, like in the partial equilibrium, competitive equilibrium setup. Here, this potentially can be huge. So when I was younger, uh, around probably around your age or less. So I actually was working for the World Bank and other organizations similar to that back in Ecuador. And my job was basically to do these, what's called computable general equilibrium models, right? So basically these will high, dimensional models designed to do counterfactual analysis of different economic policies for different countries. And in particular was focused on Ecuador, right? So these models were very famous in the 90s. And basically these were models that had, for instance, the one that I worked was one kind of mid-size. It had 36 goods, right? Which means actually sectors. And then you also have like, this is basically what I'm saying is in the 36 goods, you have specified things such as the leather industry, the beverage industry, the food industry, agriculture separated in with the different openings and so on. So these economies, can actually be huge. And now, for instance, there is they are always used for trade. So these models can get really big if you have different economies and different goods, right? So potentially these matrices can be huge. They're specifying, all consumptions and all production vectors. So try to visualize this, Y's when they are negative is inputs, right? And when they're positive is production of these quantities. So X in right now, we are thinking of them basically as positive quantities, right? No, in fact, in the general setup, they can actually be negative quantities because you can also load models here of finance, but you can go short, so you can owe money, right? So right now, this is a very, very general specification, okay? So this matrix here, again, the notation is a little bit confusing, so I want you to be careful when reading mass collel, right? So try to have in mind what is the dimension of this thing. When you see just this X and Y, is actually this huge matrix, right? So be careful of that. Is this notation mass collel is a bit confusing sometimes. And then what we want is this to describe this feasible Pareto allocation, which is no other allocation that is feasible in the economy. That means that it has to be less than equal than all production and all endowments, the consumption of the individuals in this economy. No feasible allocation, Pareto dominates the first allocation, okay? So that means that there is no other allocation such that this is weakly better for all individuals and strongly better for at least one individual, okay? So now, everyone is clear on this general setup. So this general setup, is just a description of consumptions, productions, and feasibility, nothing else. Now,
excuse me, Professor. So can you just go back to definition 74 again?
Yep.
So, sorry, 75. So this X, Y, you said this is the matrix?
Yep. So look at this, right? Each X is basically the specification in the consumption space of individual I. So the columns here are L-dimensional vectors, okay? So exactly, good question, David. That's exactly the trouble a lot of people have reading this chapter, is basically having an idea of the correct dimensions of these objects, right? This allocation is a matrix, right? What is the size of it? Is L rows, and then what are the columns is I plus J. So the total number of consumers and firms. Got it?
Okay.
Now, from all possible economies you can describe here, you can have different economies, right? Some may be centralized, but of course, we're interested in this class mainly on private ownership economies, right? And so what are private ownership economies? So we're going to describe a very simple private ownership economy. And basically this model can be applied to any other structure, right? So the modeling tools are very general, but this particular model is called the private ownership economy. And here we say that all consumers own the firms. So firms are privately owned by the consumers, and we have, this is general equilibrium, so everything is included here. So that means that on top of having endowments, they also have a share on each of the firms, right? And basically everyone, so if you have the ownership of the firms in this economy, all consumers will own all firms, right? So there is no owner left out of this description of the economy, okay? And that's capturing this restriction that when I the shares here, first of all, I am saying that if I sum over firms, then the share is going to be equal to 1. So this is, for individual one, is how much they own of different firms. And then also I'm requiring basically that all firms are owned privately here So there is no there is no government here. No, there is no foreign agents. All firms are domestically owned and so on. Now, how does it change the description of the economy? Well, basically, it will change now the definition of an equilibrium. So before we had an economy, now we are going to define an equilibrium. So a private ownership economy is specified by these set of primitives. So this is the choices, the preferences on them for all individuals. So this is usually called the preference profile. Okay, so this is a vector of preferences or an array of preferences. The second is the production set profile. So this is the different heterogeneous production possibilities for all firms. And then finally, we have the description of endowments and the description of shares. So this is how the firms are privately owned, okay? So now we have a particular allocation now. This is a numerical matrix, X star, Y star, and a price vector, right? So this is actually a vector of size L, okay? No longer a matrix. Constitutes a valuation equilibrium if basically all firms are profit maximizing. So you can see here that at the given prices, right, price taking, the Y star allocation in the equilibrium is greater than equal than P times other Yj's for all Yj's in the production set. So this here is basically telling me that the observed allocation here, Y star, is the maximal in terms of profits. Do you agree? Okay, so do you recognize that this is a profit? Remember that Y when negative is inputs, Y when positive is outputs, right? So this is giving me sales minus cost, okay? So prices are given, Y star is the actual realized observed allocation of production, the supply. And this is the optimal supply because this is the one that maximizes profits for firms for all feasible allocations. So this is the quantifier here for all Yj in the capital Yj. Got it? So just to fix ideas, how can you grade it if every firm is endowed with a production function? Okay. So you will write it, basically you could write it, imagine there is only one output, right? Then it will be very simple, right? Price of the output times F of the production function of the input set minus the cost of the input, right? And if you maximize that, the allocation which you see here, which is YW star, will be the quantity of output Q and then the quantity of the input set, okay? So that's the special case. This is way more general and it can be potentially huge. You can have here hundreds of goods, okay? Got it? So very compact notation, but it's very high dimensional. So also Mascolel, and I'm following Mascolel here, also omits the sets of the quantifiers, right? So for instance, you have for all J in the set of firms, right? So, but this is very understandable here. However, notice that where these things are running from. So how many equations do you have here? Basically, you have to check all possible Y's in the feasible set, right? And basically you have the one allocation that you're checking where it's optimal or not, okay? Then second, consumers utility max, well, here there is no utility yet, but a preference maximized. So the allocation X star is the best according to the preferences of individual I, and in fact is better than any Xi in the budget set. So, but now, because it's general equilibrium and also a private economy, the budget share is not only the multiplication of P times omega. Also, you have to put here the profits, right? So as you can see next in this term here, this is the summation over all the shares that you have of firm J, right? Over all firms of the profits. And what is the profits? P times Yj, okay? So if this profit is positive, you're gaining some money, right? So this is the dividends paid by your investments, okay? So this is private share economy. Do you get it? So the second part is the standard utility preference maximization, but the budget is new. The budget has two parts, the part that you learned in the previous class, which is the price times endowment, okay? But also a new part, which is how much dividends you get from owning the different firms, okay? Notice here that this is not a theory about how people get to own these firms, right? This is given, a parameter. So I know I start the description of the economy with the theta. Okay, got it? Okay.
So
And
the theta is like the share the consumers receive out of the profit. That's how I
okay, yeah,
understood it. Okay.
exactly. So now,
Sorry, I have a question.
Sure.
The profit must be positive, right? I just a bit confused about it because you
Not
said,
necessarily at this stage. So profits firms can be losing money, right?
yeah,
Versus if you're legally, bound to assume those losses, right? Then
yeah.
you will owe. But so at this stage, it's super general. So yeah, again, this is just a description of the model. I'm not stating existence. I'm not stating uniqueness, right? So that's why all these weird things can happen. Then we're going to assume many things, and then this will rule out basically these weird cases, right? But at this stage, it's super general. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And the final and more important setup, right, is the famous thing that you learn in undergrad level, which is demand is equal to supply, right? Plus endowments. So you also have endowments here, right? So what is the dimension of this expression in 3? How many equations do I have in 3?
L equation.
Sorry?
L equation.
L equations. Yep. Everyone understands why? So each x sub I, right? This is the index of the individual. The summation is over individuals on the left-hand side, right? Each x is a vector of size L, okay? So now on the right-hand side, omega is of size L, right? This is total endowment, okay? So this is already in the notation of Mascolel. This is already the sum over all omegas, right, across individuals, right? But then each row, so therefore the omega there is a size L vector, column vector. And then the last part is just the summation over firms, okay? So yeah, this notation is a mess, but when Mascolel was teaching it, physics was famous, so it's called the Einstein notation. So it's just shortcut, right? It's not very, formal as we would do it, but I'm trying to follow the Mascolel so you can read it. But yeah, so the notation basically tells you this is a size L, right? So actually we'll rewrite it, right? So I'm going to define this as, let's actually do it like this, right? So this is the sum over individuals. And here you have the good L, right? Good L, good I. Sum I equal to 1, capital I. And then here you have sum J equal to capital J, right? L for all L. Okay? So this will be the scalar notation, more standard one. Okay? Get it? Yeah, so be careful on this chapter, right? This chapter is full of these shortcuts in notation. So try to keep in mind and keep track of the dimension of everything. Okay? So now this expression 3 now is basically for all L. Okay? The expression 2 is for all I. Okay? Expression 1 is for all J basically. Okay? You can see here for all J. Okay? So basically you have how many equations? So basically this is a huge amount of equations, but how many conditions at least? So you have capital J conditions for the profit maximization, capital I conditions for the consumer preference maximization, and then L conditions for the last part, okay? So this, in the end, right, is a system of equations, very nonlinear, very hard, that is what are the unknowns of this equation? It's basically the allocation, right? X, Y star, and the price. So this is a matrix here, L times I plus J, and this is an L column vector, okay? And what are the primitives of this system of equations? So consumption spaces, but that usually we assume in a way, so everyone has the same consumption space, but basically preference profiles, technologies, right? And in the private economy, endowments and shares. Got it? So this is a huge thing, okay? So it's a huge thing. So you give me these primitives and I give you the allocations and the price. Okay, so now I want you to stop and remember, if you were reading Mascolel, they say, Mascolel starts with a prologue to these markets chapters. And he said, general equilibrium is one of the most ambitious theories ever. So do you know why? So did you read the Mascolel, Mr. Green? So why do you think this is so ambitious? Someone has an opinion? Even you didn't read it? So try to tell me what we're trying to do here.
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is it's ambitious in the sense that we're sort of mixing together all these different parts, and we're trying to come up with something, like an allocation X star, Y star, which is quite simple, but from such a complex problem.
Okay, David, thanks. So that's correct, right? So we are basically trying to describe, first of all, so I agree there's a lot of complexity here, hidden complexity. I basically want you to understand that what we're trying to do is basically try to describe all society economic exchanges, right? So if you had such a perfect economy with private ownership, basically we are setting up a model that when we know your preferences, when we know your technologies, we know the property structure, and we know the endowments, we can predict exactly, right? All consumptions, all production, right? And the prices at which this is done, okay? So very, very ambitious, because basically this is telling you, economic exchanges are predictable, right? From knowledge of preferences, technologies, and so on. Now, econ is very successful. So at least some version of this model more or less describes some of the economy. Now we're very far from, physics, right? So in particular, this thing is relying on a lot of things that we are assuming right now. In particular, statement one is assuming firms profit maximize. So if you're trying to describe real economies, that is easy to see that may fail, right? So profit maximization implies, for instance, price taking. So you don't have monopolies, you don't have duopolies, you don't have market power, right? So that falls apart easily. Then second stage, consumers utility maximize. In the time of Mascolel, they say at least we know consumers utility maximize. Now we're not sure, right? Maybe they're inattentive, who knows, right? So they don't seem to be perfect. And with the pandemic, we learned that we are far from perfect, right? So rationality, maybe a good working assumption for some things, but for others, it's not that great. Now, and then finally, the market's clear. Okay, so the final one is kind of tricky because it's almost like an accounting thing, right? But at the same time, it's telling you that there is a marketplace, right, where people can come and then start exchanging, and then eventually, they can match two different sellers and buyers and create a transaction. So the last one, right now in our mathematical setup is not very rich. We cannot describe, the complexity of society, but it's assuming a lot. It's assuming that people can in fact come together, exchange. They have a marketplace, they can match to each other, and they will be able to clear the market, right, if they want to. Okay, so that's also a lot of assumptions, right? Sometimes we know there are no markets for some goods. What do I mean by that? For instance, before the Kyoto Protocol, right, there were not markets for these green bonds where some countries were reducing emissions of CO2, and then others were buying these reductions of emissions, right? So people may want to sell and people may want to buy, but there was no market, right? So the UN has to create that market, right? So it has to be artificially grown, right? So Kijiji here in Canada, right, creates new markets, right? Previously, if I had my old console, video game console that I didn't play anymore, could you sell it? Yeah, but it's very hard to do it, right? A lot of transaction costs, and then another person can buy it, potentially, I don't know who, right? So people ran garage sales and so on, but they weren't perfect. Now with Kijiji, I put any piece of, old thing that I have in my house, and then someone else wants it, and there is a price, right? So that's pretty cool. Now, so new markets can come to existence, other markets can disappear because they are also banned, right? So they say, look, prohibition. Canada didn't have it, right? You profit from it, but the Americans, they basically they say, okay, you're no longer gonna be able to sell alcohol, right? That didn't destroy them all markets, but certainly many. So yeah, that's the issue, right? So the third part, is how markets come to be here. We're assuming they exist. So I mean, so again, that's not the point. The point is that that doesn't. Reality has never stopped economies, right? We're pragmatical. We're go-getters in econ. That's what we have to learn. So we don't care, right? So we just go and say we're still going to describe allocations, and then let's give it a try. And sometimes, if we do well, then great. If we do badly, then we're gonna backtrack and try to fix it. Okay. So this is more an engineering mindset, right? More than a scientific mindset. So I want you to think here more like engineers. So when I want to tell you that in reality, people do this. So do this because we need to still evaluate different policy changes in markets. And the benefit of having a general equilibrium setup is that we're able to try to model, right, maybe unsuccessfully, the complex exchange and the complex production relations and consumptions implications in an economy. So the whole point of general equilibrium is that if you want to understand, for instance, and this is the classical example, what is the effect of opening your economy, for instance, for trade? And you want to liberalize a particular market. Say, for instance, in Canada, one very protected market is, milk, right? Milk production. So say tomorrow we want to liberate that market. So make it super easy for importing, reduce subsidies. So what will happen with the rest of the economy? So of course we know that the consumption of milk, so the demand side is going to be impacted, right? Because potentially, milk is going to get cheaper. But at the same time, you also know that, for instance, farmers that were getting high income before due to this, now they're going to lose their livelihood, some of them, which will affect, local demands of housing, other products of these farmers, right? And so on. So this will affect another market, which is, for instance, the housing market maybe in Quebec. And then, of course, if people now from the demand side are able to buy cheaper milk, then they have some extra money, right? So what will they buy with that, right? So maybe the market of bread will change because now they have extra money. They will buy a better bread than just white bread. Maybe they're buying a croissant, who knows, right? In the margin, some people may do. And then now you have some people now, having breakfast with croissant. That's great, right? So, but you see, so this is very hard. And this is actually, if you remember this butterfly effect, so this is from the examples in which prediction of weather, right, which is very similar to predicting the economy, is that so if some butterfly, moves her wings on Brazil, you may have a tornado in the middle of Ohio, right? So because of very complex interactions. Now, so this model here, at this stage is super general. So, and I actually there are very good examples of general equilibrium models that generate chaotic behavior, such as the butterfly effect. So actual formally chaotic behavior. So general equilibrium is so rich that you can generate almost anything, right? And so a little bit, what I want you to understand is that this seems very simple, but in fact it's a monster, right? It's a huge thing and it's a very cool general idea that we don't understand. So economists don't understand, but we are engineers, so we use it in many setups to different degrees of success, okay? So, but right now I just want you to understand the scale of this project, right? So this thing now is a monster, right? Now we have unleashed it, we have to understand now what is going on. But at this stage is very general, right? So we have each individual have their own preferences, each firm have their own technologies, and they come together and they exchange in every market, okay? So huge thing. Now, so we're going to define this, which is special. Is basically a different case from private economy. This is called the price equilibrium transfers, right? So here we have the same preferences profiles, technology profiles, an allocation, a price. And now, instead of having shares of firms, instead I have just an income vector, which is income vector is given by the multiplication of endowments times prices, so it's still endogenous in that sense. And then basically I have the multiplication of these. So basically the total incomes in the economy are equal to total endowments plus total profits. And then some entity like the government comes here, collects all this income, puts it in a gold pot, right? And then basically shares back to the individuals in here, giving them an income vector. Okay, so this is a fully centralized. So there is a king, right, or a queen takes all the money for the pot of gold and then decides to allocate this income vector. Got it? So it's still, prices are still, income is still endogenous, but they depend on the total production of the economy only in the aggregate. Do you get it? So the only way income depends on the endowments, total endowments, and on the production and therefore profits is by means of total income. Okay, so this is the total production and total physical goods. The king owns it totally, right, and then gives it back in the form of a vector of income. Okay, so this is the opposite of private ownership. Okay, and then here again, this economy, firms still profit maximize. You know, they're almost like robots. So here we are not modeling really behavioral firms. Price take, they try to profit maximize, right? And then consumers, they utility maximize subject to this income. Still, general equilibrium, income is endogenous in the sense I described. And finally, we have the demand is equal to supply. Okay? So we have these two definitions, and now we're going to prove something, some results. The first one basically is the formal proof of the Adam Smith invisible hand. Okay? And that's why they give it this very, fancy name. The first fundamental theorem of welfare econ. So we want to sound like calculus, right? But it's fine, right? It's actually a cool result. So it says the preference relation can actually be heterogeneous, completely general. On the consumption set, it's just assumed to be locally non-associated for every xi. So it's rational, right? But it doesn't have to be monotone. It only has to be locally non-associated, right? And then you will remember that locally non-associated means that there exists some allocation xi very close to any other allocation, epsilon close, in fact, such that this xi prime is strictly better than xi. So there is no thick indifference curves, right? Or you can always find something locally better, okay? No association point. So now, first fundamental welfare theorem of welfare econ, if preferences are locally non-associated, and if the allocation x star, y star, big matrix, comma, p, column vector, is a price equilibrium with transfers, definition, right? The previous thing we defined it. Then the allocation x star, y star is Pareto optimal. In particular, any well-rational equilibrium allocation is Pareto optimal. So remember, so you can always describe a private ownership economy as a price equilibrium with transfers, right? Because I can give them back the income level, W, equal to whatever they were owning privately, right? So I can make it numerically the same. The centralized income to the original income they get, okay? So this price equilibrium with transfers mathematically is more general. So I have proven, and I'm going to prove that this theorem for the most general case of price equilibrium with transfers. Okay, so now, as I say again, in particular, any well-rational equilibrium allocation, which is with a private ownership economy, is Pareto optimal because it's a special case. So let's prove it. Okay. So again, this is the Adam Smith invisible hand. So if you let all individuals in this economy, firms and agents, individually maximize their own objectives, subject to the restrictions of the economy and subject to the market clearing condition, the outcome of the society will be Pareto optimal. So there is no waste, full coordination. So first of all, this is assuming the existence of the price equilibrium with transfers. So this is not saying that you're able to do it, but if you do it, you're going to reach the social optimum. Got it? Okay, so this is not about existence, it's about optimality. So suppose you have this allocation, price, and this is a price equilibrium with transfers, and that the associated well levels are these income vectors, Wi to Wi. So recall that this in aggregate has to match what physically exists in the economy and the physical profits. Now, the preference maximization part of the notion of price equilibrium with transfer requires that if you have something that is better than the allocation, right? Then, by virtue of utility maximization, it has to be that this P times Xi allocation that is dominant, right, is not affordable, right? And then, of course, by local association, you have to live at the boundary. So therefore, Walras law holds, right? So here, a statement that is highlighted is Walras law. A statement before that is just saying that the Xi star, if it's an equilibrium, has to be maximum. So this is telling you that you have an allocation that is above the maximizer. It has to be non-affordable. Do you agree? Okay, and then the final statement is just that the W is equal to the Walras law, right? Okay, now under local association, right, we get that if basically if Xi is greater than or equal than Xi prime, then P times multiplied by that is greater than or equal than Wi. So to verify that, we consider something that is slightly better than Xi star. And let's assume now that this is affordable strictly by contradiction. Then by local association, there is still an X prime that is affordable, making this thing non-optimal, right? So this is exactly what I say now mathematically. Okay, so now, given this observation, let's prove the main theorem, which tells me that there is no allocation that Pareto dominates this allocation X star Y star, right? That is feasible. Okay, so consider an allocation that Pareto dominates X star and Y stars. Okay, this means that for all individuals, Xi is weakly better than Xi star, and then there is one individual at least for which Xi is better than Xi star. Now, by the previous argument, I know that for this particular individual, this allocation has to be strictly non-affordable for the individual I. Okay, so this is a huge number of individuals. I find one individual I, for which the new allocation is above the budget. Okay. Now, if I take summations over these objects, so summations over the multiplication of P times Xi over the individuals, then I will notice that this is strictly greater than the summation over Wi. Why? Because there is this entry for which this happens, right? So if for the rest is the same and there is one where this is above, then it has to be above for all, okay? So now this, of course, by the definition of price equilibrium with transfers, this has to be equal to this condition, which is not other than affordability, right? So this is the whole market clearing condition, the right-hand side. So that means by profit maximization, to finish the argument, remember that this term here, which are profits, have to be profit maxima. So therefore, these are greater than or equal than P times Y, any other Y that is feasible, right? So now, in particular, this is the Wi in the allocation that Pareto dominates, the X star, W star. So putting everything together, I conclude that the new allocation, which consists of X and Y, is not affordable because there is not an equal sign. It's a strict greater than sign. Do you get it? Okay, so I use everything here. So I use the fact that profits maximize in this step. Okay, I use here local association, and here I use the fact that firms are, this is a price equilibrium with transfers. And of course, this inequality comes from the utility maximization part. So putting everything together with local association, I get that the new allocation that Pareto dominates, the X star Y star allocation at the same price, is not feasible. Okay, so there is no such an allocation. So which means that X, Y star must be Pareto optimal. Okay, so now Adam Smith has been validated, right? So this was a big deal in the 60s. Of course, then we realized, so the way people saw it in the 60s was saying, oh, look, private economies are efficient, right? But then, it was easy to see that you can generalize it to price equilibrium with transfers. So it's not that private economies are efficient, it's that any exchange economy, when you have a price signal, is efficient, right? Even if you're a centralized one. So you just have to let people produce and consume at their own, devices, and then you can basically centralize all the resources by means of a complete tax. Okay, so you basically have expropriation. I take 100% of your tax, but I still let you consume and produce according to this income profile I have given you. Still, things will work. You see. So then, I have a question for the people that follow some of the world news. So then, who follows the economy of Venezuela? So what happened there? So you know what happened with Venezuela? So if you follow the news, right? So Venezuela was one of the richest countries in South America. They have oil, very big country, very rich country in natural resources. And in the last, I think it basically is in the last possibly 10 years or so, it has imploded, right? And so now it's one of the poorest countries. You cannot even find bread in the stores or in the shelves, right? So production has collapsed. So then people blame socialism, right? But it's not really socialism, it's the messing up with the price signal. So one of the main reasons, that economy collapsed is basically that Chavez and others created this fair prices idea. So you say you have to have a fair price for bread. So you cannot sell it at more than 1 bolivar, whatever, right? So if that happens, then then you break the price signal. So how can consumers and producers coordinate in order to be able to produce this optimal allocation? There is no way, because the government can try to tell them, look, we need you to produce or you're going to go to jail. But how do I know how much to produce, right? The price is so powerful because it tells you with this number that you see when you go to any of the stores you go to purchase your groceries, you see this price of bread, right? This white loaf of bread costs around $1. And then that dollar has a lot of information, right? So who follows The Economist, this magazine that sometimes they have interesting stuff. So they have this Big Mac index, right? Which is basically the price of a Big Mac in different countries, and they claim is a good indicator of how costly, how good the cost of living is. And they have a point, right? Because to make a burger you need buns, which require bread, which you need meat, you need also some vegetables, and you need also labor. So all these are very important inputs for any economy, right? So knowing the price of a Big Mac in each country will tell you a lot about the economy, right? So of course, things have changed a lot. So maybe you can substitute for other good. My main point is that prices contain a lot of information. They are basically a coordination device. And that's what makes these economies efficient, not private ownership. Are we clear, right? So the fact that ownership is private or not is inessential. It's all about prices and letting these different units in a decentralized way choose the optimal allocation, okay? So this is the essence of the first welfare theorem, okay? So
there's some assumption that I guess I don't remember, but for the proof of this, right? We didn't really assume anything like homogeneity of degree 0 or the preference being rational or those things.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's try to actually generalize this theorem. So
okay.
The first question would be even deeper. So do we need rationality here? I will claim no. And in fact, Schoenstein and Schaefer prove it. So you can prove this only by assuming two things. That first of all, when consumers maximize their preferences, possibly non-rational, they produce a maximum, right? So basically there has to exist a maximum of your preference maximization, even if they are non-rationals, okay? So one general condition that gives you that is that preferences are convex, right? But there are other conditions. Now, second thing is that you do need local non-association. The center or heart of this proof is local non-association, right? Okay? So because that will make you work at the boundary, right? So there is no waste, there is no association, right? So there is no inactivity, okay? Firms, do we need them to be just profit maximizers? Well, they can be cost minimizers. You know, they can also be many different things. Also, firms even here don't play much of a role. So we can replace these conditions by others, right? And you can still get Pareto optimality. So my point being is that really the heart of this condition is not, of course, homogeneity or transitivity. It's all about local association and the price signal, right? So the real assumption is, of course, price taking. So if you don't have price taking, then you're in trouble, right? Because you know, then you can start colluding. There is inefficiencies. So basically, if you have market power, you can use your market power to extract, some rents from this economy, and therefore you will create inefficiencies in your favor. Okay. Now we are more modern than Mas-Colel, right? I hope so. But so what other assumptions are we making here that is huge? We have been discussing it all, all the first part of the class. So if you're price taking, you are not only, just not market power, you're also fully attentive, right? So you actually have to understand the prices. So you have to actually, know the prices. So what's up with that, right? so I think that's one of the main issues in terms of this, right? So the price, the attention to prices is a big deal, right? Because if you don't pay attention to all prices, then can you expect, for instance, some markets to be efficient, right? That's a big question, right? For instance, yeah. So even if rationality is not first order in the sense of transitivity, you only need local association. You still need to have that people understand and get prices. Okay, that's a very important assumption. So so being attentive to prices. So we're gonna see one example later, but with the GABEX model. So I'm gonna expand on that later. But now I want to finish the whole idea with the second, very very fancy name, second fundamental theorem of welfare econ. Okay, and now this gets more interesting, and actually I like this more because the first one is a bit ideological, right? So as I told you in the previous class, I see it more as how you can solve a centralized problem in a decentralized way, and how this is possible, right? But the second theorem is more important, and I will explain why. So the second welfare theorem tells me that I can give you conditions under which a Pareto optimum, in fact, any Pareto optimum, can be supported as a price equilibrium with transfers, okay? Which is pretty cool. So in this case, you're a designer, you're a social designer, and for some reason you prefer some Pareto allocation, right? So out of all possible allocations that are Pareto, which can be a huge amount, right? You pick one. Reasons you may want to pick a particular Pareto allocation, as I explained in the previous class, may be inequality concerns, right? Okay, got it? So, now we live in a perfect society, and artificial intelligence being governed as, and the artificial intelligence being learned Mas-Colel, right? And now this guy, this artificial intelligence being that governed as, wants to maximize happiness, and he noticed that humans, we don't not only care about efficiency, right? No waste, but we also care about inequality, right? If there is no waste and you're super poor and other guy is super rich, filthy rich, then you're angry, right? So then you like some equality there, right? Some fairness. We even put a nice name, fair, right? Very American name, very North American name. And then, what do we do with that? Then the question for the AI, artificial intelligence, how do I actually implement it in reality? But because he learned Mas-Colel already, or she learned Mas-Colel, then this being knows how to do it. And the way to do it basically is by just moving around the income vector. Okay, so the transfers, I can basically let the economy untouched. Don't mess with the prices that Chavez did, right? Don't do that. that's the signal here. So the artificial intelligence guy knows that you don't have to be like Chavez, but you basically use you don't mess with the price. You can only mess with the income vector. So you can mess with the budget, okay? Not with the price. You can mess with the slope, okay? Sorry, not with the slope. You can mess with the intercept. That's the teaching here. That's the whole second welfare theorem. I can give you any income I want to be able to make you do what I want, okay? But I cannot mess with the prices. If I mess with the prices, I'm screwed. So basically, the result says this. First of all, I need to define a mathematical object, which is called price quasi-equilibrium with transfer, okay? And don't discard this because it's weird and the name is weird and looks overly mathematical. Again, for some reason, it's overly represented in core exams. Not by my hand, but it's reality. And not in Western alone, everywhere. Theorists love the quasi-equilibrium with transfers. They are in love with it. But basically, it's a very, mathematical definition, doesn't have economic intuition. So it's a sure way to know if you read Mascolet. But I'm really telling you, pay more attention to this, right? So you get less trapped by the trick question, traditional trick question. And basically, this price equilibrium with transfer is going to be the same as the price equilibrium with transfers, but with a small change. And the small change is in condition 2. So instead of being utility maximizers, you are just something weaker, which basically you can call it expenditure minimizers, right? Which can be described as follows. If you have a condition xi, which is strictly better than xi star, which is the allocation of interest, the equilibrium, then price multiplied by this candidate allocation that is strictly better is greater than equal than wi, okay? So it has to be more expensive. So therefore, these agents, xi star, can be called the expenditure minimization bundle, okay? And we know that under many conditions, under simple conditions, these two guys are the same, right? So expenditure minimizing is equal to utility maximizing, but that requires monotonicity, it requires convexity and other things that we are not assuming here. So in general, 2 is different from utility maximizing. Do you get it? So 2 is requiring something weaker than utility maximization. It's just requiring expenditure minimization, okay? Otherwise, it's the same as price equilibrium with transfers, okay? Do you agree? So we get the definition of the price quasi-equilibrium with transfers, especially important definition for until you take the core exam. And now, right, I'm gonna give you the second welfare theorem. So consider an economy specified by preference profile, technologies, endowments, and suppose that every technology is convex. So here we're not allowing increasing technology. So firms that as they get larger, get more efficient, that's not the case. You actually have to have weekly decreasing or at least constant returns to scale, okay? So in the Cobb-Douglas, you have capital and labor, the alpha of capital and the beta of labor has to add up to less than equal than 1, okay? That's what I'm saying for the world of simple capital and labor, 1 output. But of course, for the world of multiple outputs, is about a shape constraint on the production set. So the production set is convex, okay? And every preference relation is also convex. So what is convexity of preference relations? I remind you, I define the upper contour set. So fix any bundle and then define all the things that are weakly better than the X bundle, right? If that set there is convex, therefore the preferences are convex. So intuitively means if I take 2 mixes of any 2 goods, right, that are better than a third point X, then the 2 goods, Y and Z, I take a convex combination. I draw a line through them. Any point in that segment is still better than the X commodity, right? So that's another way to think about convexity. So preferences are convex, and also they are locally non-associated. You need locally non-association again. Then for every Pareto optimal allocation, in this economy, there is a price vector. And notice here that this price vector may be actually negative. You see, it's just different from 0 at this stage, right? Such that X star, Y star is a price equilibrium with transfers, okay? Which is pretty cool. So again, I'm this artificial intelligence guy, right? I'm not Chavez. I'm trying to do the Mascolet, Winston, and Green. How do I do it? I take basically all resources in the economy, endowments plus total profits. I create this income profile. So I basically send a check or basically virtual credits, Bitcoin to each individual in this economy, right? And they get it. And then they start consuming at what price? At whatever price they want. They're going to come up with a price, right? So I don't care. I let them exchange, and they're going to find the terms of exchange to basically maximize preferences and maximize profits. And however, the outcome of this process is going to be what I want. Okay, do you see what's happening here? So this is social engineering. Okay, so this is of course a very cool theoretical possibility with strong assumptions, but nevertheless very cool possibility that basically a social designer can implement any allocation the society wants by giving a particular universal income, right, to each agent. And basically can tune this vector in any way that I want to achieve any social outcome I want that is Pareto optimal. Don't you think this is amazing? Well, this is pretty cool, right? Now, in reality, it's harder to do, but it tells you some of the justification why, you know, redistribution in terms of income may work, right? So just don't use prices to redistribute, right? Don't do the Chavez thing, right? If you're trying to create a fair price or a minimum wage, that's a very lame idea. Minimum wage can be a good idea if there is market power, monopsony, right? That's the new literature on why minimum wage is good. Just to clarify, right? So you don't say, Victor is not aware of the latest advances in minimum wage literature. That's not the case. I just want you to understand that in perfect markets, if you mess with the prices, right, that's usually a bad idea. So the better idea is to play with the incomes, right? So it's good to tax and it's good to redistribute. Do whatever you want there, right? Just don't mess with the prices. That's kind of the teaching, right? And now let's prove it. So now back to the math. So this proof is going to use what is called the separating hyperplane theorem, okay? I'm gonna need, okay, so let's prove it mathematically and then I'm gonna tell you, I had a diagram before, but doesn't matter. So this separating hyperplane theorem is an intuition that basically we have two convex sets, you can always separate them through a line, okay? So right now I want to understand pretty much the math and then we're going to draw it, right? Of course, the drawing is going to work only for 2 dimensions, but this proof works for any dimension, right? So that's basically our objective. So full disclosure. So right now we're going to big parentheses, only math, right? So just follow me with the math. It's very simple math, but we're going to leave a little bit behind the econ intuition, right? And then we're going to connect it at the end. But right now, just follow me with the math, okay? So first of all, take every single individual I and then define the following set, VI, which is the set of commodities XI in the consumption set capital XI, such that XI is strictly better for that agent I than XI star. So XI star is the allocation, is a number, right? This thing here is a set. Do you get it? So VI is a set of all the things that are better strictly than the allocation XI for each individual. So this set is indexed by I. So it's a collection of sets, okay?
Sorry, so the XI star is the expenditure minimizing quantity, I guess?
Perfect, yeah, perfect.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that's the target, in fact. So this is what the artificial intelligence entity wants to implement in the economy, okay? This is my objective, okay? So now, now I'm going to define the summation of a set, okay? So do you know how to add up sets? Well, I'm going to teach you. It's simple, right? So any element here in B can be supported as a sum of elements in each of the VIs, okay? So basically, an element of B without index is the sum of I of xi, where each xi belongs to the V sub i's. Do you get it? So this is supported. So to construct the V, I take one item from each VI, and then I add them up, okay? Now, the same thing for capital Y. So capital Y here is the sum of the production sets, okay? So again, this is easier to understand because the intuition for this is basically that you can, the government comes and nationalizes all firms, right? And now it can produce as a summation of all individual productions, right? So this is what's happening here. So the summation of these sets is basically all elements that can be supported as individual productions of each firm, right? Okay, so you have now the V set and the Y set. Now, as I told you, What is the final product? So I have my target, which is x star, y star. X star and y star are going to be related with the v set and the y set respectively. What I want is a price, a line, right, that goes in the middle or separates v from y, okay? And this is going to create a price equilibrium with transfers, okay? So now, because I have endowments, I have to shift the capital Y set plus endowment. So this is very simple because the set is really untouched structurally, but is shifted by the endowment, okay? So plus omega, so this is simple. Now, we want to show that every set VI is convex, okay? So how do I know these sets VIs are convex? Well, this follows from the preferences being convex, okay, right? So I assume that preferences are convex, therefore the upper contour set of each individual is convex. Therefore, this set VI, which is just the upper contour set, is convex, okay? It is not closed, of course, because it's the strict preference, but it's still an open convex set. Do you get it? Open convex, okay? So now this follows from preference being rational and convex. So why, how do I prove it? So suppose that xi is better than the target xi star, and xi prime is better than the target xi star. Take a mixing parameter alpha, alpha xi plus 1 minus alpha xi prime is strictly better than xi. Now I use rationality here. Given completeness of preferences, without loss of generality, we can assume that xi is better than xi prime. So because remember, completeness means that either xi is better than xi prime or the other way. So I don't care which way, but at least one way, right? So completeness gives me that at least one of the ranks is true. So now by convexity, we have that if I take again the combination of xi and xi prime, this is better than xi prime, which by transitivity yields that the combination of alpha xi plus 1 minus alpha xi prime is better than xi star, okay? So in fact, to declare that VI is convex, I actually need completeness, right? So I'm using rationality in that sense, but mainly it's convexity of preferences. So now, that was easy. Second step, the set capital V and capital Y are convex. So capital Y being convex is easy because each production set is assumed to be convex. The sum of these convex sets is convex itself, okay? So I have proven now that V is convex because it's the sum of VIs, and Y is convex because it's the sum of convex sets. Step 3. So in order to know that there is a separating hyperplane, it has to be that the two sets, the convex sets, have empty intersection, okay? So I have to prove now that the sets V and Y shifted have empty intersection. So why this is true? Well, this is just a consequence of Pareto optimality. So by contradiction, right? Assume there is an intersection, okay? So the intersection is not empty. So now, so what does it mean? Well, there is some allocation now that is better than the target allocation, right? That is also in the Y set. So therefore is Y plus omega. So therefore is feasible. So in words, the highlighted set is telling me feasible allocations, and the V set is telling me things that are better than the target allocation, okay? So because the allocation X star is Pareto optimal, there is no better allocation, right, for all individuals, right, that are feasible. So this intersection is empty. Okay? Everyone get it?
Sorry, I'm still a bit confused about this part.
Yeah, so remember, the V set is things that are strictly better for all individuals than the target. Okay? And the Y plus omega are things that are feasible. So they can be produced or they exist physically in the economy. Okay?
Right.
So what is the set of Pareto allocations? The set of Pareto allocations are things that are feasible, and there are no other allocations that dominate them, at least for one individual, right? So they are preferred strictly by at least one individual. Okay?
Oh, okay. So the basically the stuff that's in V that's better than X star or Y star, sorry, X star,
Yep.
is the only unfeasible allocation. So if you intersect with the feasible allocation, then that becomes empty. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. They are unfeasible. Okay, perfect. Good. So this is a consequence of course, X star Y star being Pareto optimal. Now, existence of the price. So the existence of the price mathematically here is going to come due to a geometrical property of these sets. So if you have two sets that are convex and the intersection is empty, the separating hyperplane theorem, right? Cool name, that is in the appendix of Mascoler, in the mathematical appendix of Mascoler. You can wiki check it now, right? Very simple theorem. Tells you have two sets, convex, and the intersection is empty. If that happens, there is a line that passes through the sets, that to the left side of the line, you have one set, and to the right side of the line, you have the other set, right? So you separate the two sets, okay? So basically, that's the price. The price is a line. So, and now, step 4 basically tells you that there is a vector, because at this stage, the separating hyperplane theorem doesn't care that the price has to be positive, right? So mathematically, it's just a vector that is non-zero, okay? So we just call it a price, but it's a generic vector. And the properties of this, I told you already intuition, but basically mathematically, they are equivalently described as follows. So there is a number R, which is a scalar, such that if I multiply P times Z, according to the inner product, this is greater than equal than R for every set in the V set, okay? So that means that, remember, these are convex sets. So by multiplying them by prices, right? What I'm saying is projecting this element in this convex set to a scalar, right? So now this scalar has to be greater than equal to this constant R, okay? And this happens for all elements in the set of unfeasible objects, which are better, right? Desirable but unfeasible, capital B. And now the opposite happens for the capital Y set. So P times Z is less than equal than R, okay? For all elements in the feasible set. So this is an equivalent description of the separating hyperplane theorem. Now, the final part of the proof basically is going to tell me this price I use in the step 4 will in fact support the price equilibrium with transfer. So I still have to show that firms profit maximize at this price, consumers expenditure minimize at this price, and markets clear, okay? So now the final step is the most important one. So we want to show that, first of all, if xi is weakly better than xi star for every I, then it will have to be that the multiplication of p times the summation of these xi's is greater than equal than r. So in this part, basically, we're going to try to combine the definitions of the sets to prove expenditure minimization. So our target is expenditure minimization, right? So suppose that xi is weakly better than xi star for every I. By local association, there is an I, for each I, sorry, there is an xi hat close to xi, epsilon close, such that xi hat is strictly better than xi, okay? And because of the strictly better part, it has to belong to the VI set. Get it? Okay. So now, because they are in the VI sets, now the summation of these items are going to be in the V set. Okay. Now, by step 4, the multiplication of P times the summation of the XI hats are greater than equal than R. Now, remember that we have a choice space, which is assumed to be in the Euclidean space. So basically, I can take limits of this xi hat, right? So this is a convex space, very nice, connected. Take the limits, and now I get xi hat going to x. And there, what happens if you pass a limit to these inequalities? Inequalities are preserved, right? So lim of this basically xi going to xi, it means that this inequality holds as well. So this is a continuity argument. I found by local association something very close that is greater than equal than r. So therefore, because this is so close, I can actually show also that this inequality holds for the original xi, okay? So that shows that any item that is weakly better than xi star has to have this property here. Now, step 6, we want to show that, in fact, not only is greater than equal, when you have xi star, in fact, has to happen with equality. So given a step 5, so again, so this means price multiplied by the summation of xi now star target is equal to p times the allocation that it happens at the optimal endowments plus the optimal production that I want to implement. And both are equal to this constant r from step 4. So given a step 5, and remember that given that xi star, right, has to satisfy that this is greater than or equal than r, right? So this is just a consequence of the previous definition, because xi star is basically weakly preferred to xi star by reflexivity of preferences, right? So any item is weakly preferred to itself, okay? So I am just replacing xi star here, okay? And therefore this means that this inequality holds for xi star, okay? So now this is why I say by step 5, this follows. Now,
Sure, I'm still kind of stuck at step 5. So what did you say about continuity? You say continuity of
yeah. So remember by local association, for any xi, I find an xi hat that is strictly above xi.
right, yeah.
Yeah. So this means these sets are in the vi sets, which means that the summation of these sets are in the v set. So
Right.
now I use the step 4 separating hyperplane theorem to tell you that p times this quantity is greater than or equal than r. Okay.
Yeah.
Now
I get
each of
to
these-
that part, and then from there, I don't understand the very last
Yeah,
part.
so again, this proof is informal by nature because this is by Mascolet. So this is basically telling you that by definition, by local association, xi hat is epsilon close to the xi, okay?
Right.
So what you're saying is basically you're finding all of these are very close. Basically, epsilon is very small, and you are letting epsilon go to 0, right?
Right.
So as you do that, basically you're applying a limit on this left-hand side of this inequality, right? So you can make a sequence of xi hats, okay?
Right. Right.
So you will make a sequence of xi hats that will go to xi, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you take the limit and therefore take this sequence to xi, then limits preserve inequalities because r is a constant, right? So therefore this part here will converge to xi and therefore this will hold, okay?
But how could we make the? Sorry. I'm very confused because we don't know anything about xi relationship between xi and r, and how do we know that by taking limits it still preserves until it reaches xi?
Remember this, so the local association means that there is always something extremely close that is strictly better, right? So you're just letting this epsilon be basically be negligible, right?
Right.
So you can basically take this inequality will still hold, okay?
But if the say xi was less than, well, sorry, the p summation xi was less than r, then
But
if you're taking, while you're taking limits, you could go past the r, couldn't it?
no, but this, so two things, right? If you had a strict inequality, it's true that the limit will break it, right? Because this is an open set, right?
Okay.
Yeah, but all these sets, remember, they are in this closed set, which with the closure that actually hits X, right? So you basically are taking a limit in an open set, but then the closure of this open set contains the Pareto optimal allocations, right? So what you're taking is basically limits going to this Pareto frontier, right?
Okay.
So they're going to be above. So again, so remember, these are just principles, very simple calculus principles, right? So the limits are preserved in weak inequalities. They are not preserved with strict inequalities, right? For instance, I will be worried if there is a strict inequality, right? Basically, I think that's your worry. But yeah, so I'm not being fully formal in the construction. This is just following Mascolet, but we're assuming here knowledge of this real analysis calculus. But what you're doing is basically using the local association assumption, saying there is xi hat, which is extremely close, and therefore basically taking this epsilon to 0, right? And then this inequality will hold. Again, the strict part may not hold, but it holds in the weak part, in the weak version. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So by step 5, we get this thing, right? Just by using reflexivity, because we know xi star is referred to itself, right? So we just replace it in this step. So now we get this step here, okay? And now I know also that xi star because of definition of Pareto allocation, together with y star have to be feasible, right? And in fact, they hold at a limit. So therefore, this holds with equality. But if this happens, then this quantity here, right? Remember that this is by definition an element of the capital Y set, okay? Plus omega, okay? By definition. So this is something that is feasible and plus shifted by the endowment. Now this is equal to the by the definition of Pareto optimality is equal to the sum over xi stars. So which means that xi star sum over I is an element of the capital Y set. So in words, Pareto allocations are feasible, right? So because they belong to the Y set, this second inequality have to hold. P times the sum over xi star is less than equal than R by step 4, right? So together, look at this. You have this first inequality here with a greater than equal to R, and the second inequality with a less than equal than R. Putting them together, it has that P times sum over xi star is equal to R exactly, right? So what it's telling you is that the Pareto allocation happens exactly multiplied by price is exactly equal to the constant R. Okay. Now, by feasibility, we basically take this equation again. So the sum over xi star over I is equal to the production in economy. We also have that multiply all these vector L by prices, you get a scalar. And this has to happen to be equal to R exactly because of this inequality here. So this mathematically is equal to R. Now, let's finish the proof. So we want to show that for every J, every firm profit maximizes. So for any firm J, take any Yj that is feasible in the set, and now take it out from the sum of Yij's, right? So I'm going to create this object, which is Yj, which is potentially different from the target Y star, and plus the sum over all Y H from H different than J star. So the rest of the sum are optimal allocations. And by definition, this belongs to the capital Y set. By the separating hyperplane theorem, this multiplication of this object is less than equal than R. So any item that belongs to the capital Y set is less than equal than R, okay? Now, given step 6, I know that R is exactly equal to the optimal allocation, okay? So replace this Y here, but Y star here, okay? Now, combine these two inequalities. Now, notice that all these summations here will kill each other. So all the Y star H different than J kill each other. So the remaining inequality is the profit maximizing inequality. So it has to be that for all Y that is feasible, P times Yj is less than equal to P times Y prime, Y star, sorry. So by this proof actually is very surprising. We're showing that individually each firm is profit maximizing, okay? So it's not only feasible and in the frontier of the aggregate production, but if I let each firm maximize their profits, they will reach the same outcome, okay? So it's just a very simple checking inequalities, right? Now, let's show that everyone now expenditure minimizes. So we want to show that for every individual I, if you have something that is strictly preferred than the target xi star, then it has to be more expensive. So consider something that in fact is strictly preferred than xi star. Because of step 5 and 6, so these are the qualities with R, we know that the object xi plus the xi h different from I has to be an element of the capital V set. Because it's an element of the capital V set, this has to be greater than or equal than R. And the term here, which is the optimal term, the Pareto allocation, has to be equal than R for the previous steps. So now, just by simple algebra, I kill this term, right? Both had signs cancel each other, like in high school canceling, right? And now what we get is basically that P times xi is greater than or equal to P times xi star, which means that these guys are expenditure minimizing, okay? And the step 9, the well levels are such that Wi is equal to P times x star. So what this algorithm is telling me is that you use the separating hyperplane theorem compute the price. With this price, you multiply it by the target allocation, okay? And you give this agent a check or a Bitcoin transfer with WI credits, okay? And if you do that, they alone will come together and produce the allocation X star, Y star, P star. Now, do you get why this is so powerful? Basically, the artificial intelligence can give you, right, a check for all these capital I guys with a number that says you are given 100 credits, right? With these credits, basically, you will produce as an economy a very complex allocation of this huge matrix of size, capital L with possibly hundreds of goods for all, hundreds of individuals and hundreds of firms, coordinating on the price P, okay? So now, how do you compute this price? Well, you have to know preferences, you have to know production sets, and then what the artificial intelligence will do is basically use the separated hyperplane theorem to compute the price P, right? And with this, the only thing you will do, you cannot tell them do this price, right? But in this theorem, basically what you will do is write them a check, right? And then with this check, they will come back, go to the economy, and then find this price by themselves, okay? Now, there are different interpretations of this result. You can also, for instance, give them the price, right, and the income, and then tell them this is the price, take it as given exchange. And then if you are really good at estimating the price from estimating the preferences and estimating the technologies, then you will be great. But price fixation is never a good idea, because a little bit the real implementation of this theorem is telling me, look, I'm going to try to implement a Pareto allocation. I know my knowledge of preferences and technologies is imperfect, right? So there is some noise, okay? So what is a more robust way of implementing this? Well, just write the check, right? And let the agents figure out the prices. So doing that, they will come up with an efficient allocation, and basically cannot exactly be the same Pareto allocation I wanted to implement, but will be close, hopefully, if the knowledge I have of preferences and technologies is good enough, okay? And what do you think people that do tax design do? So, in most countries, people actually do these computations, and maybe with very bad models, maybe they are good models. That's, history will judge them, but people do this. So for instance, if I want to see how much I'm going to change income tax in a given country, people will actually do, what is called micro simulations and general equilibrium calculations, right? So they will try to see how the new tax will change allocations and prices in an economy, right? And basically you try, if you're actually in a technocratic country, you will try to change the tax scheme to try to target certain outcome, right? Which is usually reducing poverty or reducing inequality, right? And of course, because econ is more engineering than science, then you kind of trying to approximate a solution to a hard problem, okay? So in real life, people do this, and of course, economists know that they're not able to implement exactly what they want, but by a simple transfer, they can reduce inequality, or they can reduce poverty, right? They may not reduce it to the level they wanted to, right? But they will be able to move it in the correct direction, correct whatever that means for the policymaker, right? You see? So that's what I mean by this thing actually has implications, right? Now, so the second welfare theorem is very, very cool, because basically it tells you that you can implement social outcomes by means of just writing down this credit thing, right? So you can make people do whatever you want, in the sense that they're still free to choose, but you're able to guide them through, some allocation of credits. But again, you're not messing with the price signal, right? Okay, so now we have shown that this is price equilibrium with quasi-equilibrium with transfer. So how can we make it a proper equilibrium? Well, turns out that if I assume that all the choices are convex, the zero belongs to the choice set, and the preferences are continuous, then any price quasi-equilibrium with transfers with positive incomes will be a price equilibrium with transfers. And then you will say, why Mascolel doesn't just assume it's a price equilibrium with transfers? All these assumptions are so natural. I agree, but this is the time of Mascolel where being general was more important, right? But for practical purposes, price equilibrium transfers and quasi-equilibrium are almost the same. Now, this is not true for the core exam, right? They are very different objects, so remember that. So try to actually dig into the details, right? But for practical purposes, the second welfare theorem is fundamental because these assumptions are so weak that they are not really breaking the fundamental part of the theorem, okay? Do you agree? Right, so we're just assuming continuity, technical assumption, zero is there. Maybe it's relevant in some setups, right? But I don't think it's very problematic. And basically that the consumption space is convex. That's a little bit the mathematical part, right? The fact you can make mixes and have divisibilities. Of course, we know in real life things are not divisible, but it's fine, right? We can approximate them mathematically. Here, this last part you can read. This is going to tell you how you can basically substitute some of this previous example with existence of a cheaper consumption bundle, and you can do it, okay? Now I want to finish with the general equilibrium with inattention, okay? So everything was great until this point. We believed the invisible hand, and now we're going to try to think what happens when you have an imperfect agent, okay? So notation here, sorry about that. I kind of moved it to the notation in the paper by Gavex. Try to improve this notation at some point, but I think it's still understandable. So we have as before an endowment omega, and now I'm going to define this object called the excess demand, which is nothing else than, you know, this demand that depends on prices and on the endogenous income. This is understandable, right? There is some demand, and then first argument is the price of the market. So this is an equilibrium price. And second argument is the endogenous income. So speed times the endowment. And this is indexed by the matrix of attentions. So capital M is describing all the attention parameters as in the chapter of Gavex. So these are M's between 0 and 1, that when M is equal to 1 is full attention to good 1, right? In M2 is equal to 0 means no attention to good 2 and so on. So M is this matrix. I is the index for the individual, and S is just denoting that this is an sparse agent. So this object here is called the excess demand, which is characterized by the set letter. So now when I add up all the excess demand, I get the aggregate excess demand, okay? And therefore an equilibrium is going to be a price such that it creates zero excess demand. So in this pure exchange economy, everyone gets what they want, so there is no excess demand, okay? So that's an equivalent way of describing equilibrium, which we'll dig deeper into the next chapter. Now, we're going to assume interior allocations, Pareto allocations. So that means that Pareto allocations will happen at the tangency of the indifference curves, okay? So all solutions here of the utility maximization problem will happen with non-zeros. They are positive quantities, and they happen with equality in the first order conditions. So therefore, interior allocations. Now, consumers first are going to be such that their inattention parameters are the same. So you may be fully attentive, so a special case being rational, but you also may be inattentive. But if you're inattentive, every agent here has the same inattention, okay? So for instance, Eduardo and me, both we pay half attention to the price and half attention to the price of rice. So we have the same inattention, okay? This is a very strong assumption. Now, for all I and j in all the set of individuals, even only if the allocation X star, pure exchange, there is no production, and prices are such that this is basically Pareto efficient. So what is the key thing here? The if and only if. So you only get a Pareto efficiency from the market pure exchange situation if and only if you have the same inattention. So in particular, everyone is rational, therefore same inattention or same attention, right? You're fine. But what happens if you have asymmetric attention? For instance, say that we're in this laboratory and Eduardo pays more attention to the price of bread than I do. So he pays perfect attention to the price of bread. I pay no attention to the price of bread, right? And then for the price of rice is the opposite. So Eduardo doesn't pay attention at all at the price of rice. And I actually pay all attention to that group. So therefore, when we go to exchange to the market, and the auctioneer or the experimenter tells us the exchange rate is this, right? So here we cannot even think in terms of exchange rate because they now think in terms of prices nominally. So we're told the signals, and I am looking only at the second entry of this price vector. Eduardo is looking only at the first entry. How can we exchange, right? So it's an issue of information, not of the information about types of agents. This is very different from games. It's all about the price vector. So the signaling coordination device, which is price, now is imperfectly perceived. If that happens, it's no longer an equilibrium. And with this, I'm going to finish in 1 minute. So if you solve basically this problem, we know that by first order conditions, any allocation here is going to be proportional to the price with a given marginal income, right? These first order conditions from before. So if you are an interior Pareto allocation, it has to happen that the marginal rate of substitution of individual I and the marginal rate of substitution of individual J are the same for any two goods L and K, okay? And by utility maximization, we also have the marginal rate of substitution is equal to the ratio of prices. So that's pretty cool, right? That's the optimization part. But now, if attentions are different, now the psychological price of individual I and the psychological price of individual J may be different, right? So the whole key of exchange was that because consumers try to equate marginal rate of substitution to the ratio of prices, they come together to the market and exchange at this exchange of marginal rates of substitution. So prices contains all the information about preferences. When you have misperception, this signal is broken, right? And therefore you have that this equality in terms of marginal rate of substitution breaks, okay? So this is all. So now I'm going to stop the recording and then you can ask me questions if you have any.